line of thinking whenever I listed these 10 names. I didn't deep dive into everyone's statistics, all-star games, MVP appearances. I just thought about it. What names resonate with me? Which names, when I think about writing the story of baseball history, do I think belong in the Hall of Fame? And that's why going down the list as I have it, the first name on there, Barry Bonds. I'm a little bit more lenient with steroid guys. I think it was a big part of the era. When they say the phrase, everyone is doing it, there was a lot of people doing it. And when I think about guys on this Hall of Fame ballot here, like Barry Bonds, like Roger Clemens, who is also on my list, I think about guys that we all are in unison and agreement would have been Hall of Famers without the extracurriculars. But because they had those, we decide to take them off our ballots. And I think that's a little bit wrong in a line of thinking, because when baseball had these guys, when baseball was profiting on these guys, they didn't seem to mind as much. Obviously, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa revitalized the game of baseball in the late 90s. Barry Bonds in the early 2000s with what he was doing with the 2001 season where he had 73 bombs. Everyone was tuning into baseball. It was more popular than the NBA. And even in some aspects in the 90s was rivaling the NFL. And granted, the NFL isn't what it is today. So those are two names out the gate there I think are important towards the history of baseball. I don't think baseball would want to be in a place where they don't have their all-time hits leader and their all-time home runs leader missing from their Hall of Fame. Andrew Jones, a guy who had over 400 home runs in his career. I think Andrew Jones, although there is that thought that he didn't quite live up to the hype when he first got drafted, still 400 home runs is not an easy thing to do. There is not a lengthy list of guys who have hit that mark. Alex Rodriguez, another steroid guy here. Alex Rodriguez, top 5 in home runs, barely missed out on the 700 club, regarded as one of the best shortstops of all time. Alex Rodriguez, I think, has a spot in the Hall of Fame for me. Curt Schilling, you can say Curt Schilling's an asshole. You can say Curt Schilling's a piece of shit, but he was also a good player. I'm going off Curt Schilling, the player, not Curt Schilling, the person here. When I think about writing the history of baseball, 2004, breaking the Red Sox all-time World Series losing streak, the bloody sock, also doing the same for the Diamondbacks a couple years later. Curt Schilling earned his spot in the Hall of Fame on that. Gary Sheffield. When I think of just cool players, when I think of players that just have that kind of swagger, Gary Sheffield's that guy. If I say Gary Sheffield Jr., that means something to a lot of people. Gary Sheffield with his little batting stance too, the little moving it back and forth, it just has so much cachet with me. 500 home runs too for Gary Sheffield. No argument there. I also have Andy Pettit. Again, steroid guy. Andy Pettit, though, without the roids. In 2009, last Yankees World Series run, him, AJ Burnett, CC, 3-man rotation. They got it done for the Yankees. Andy Pettit, so many clutch moments. Had that game 6, I believe, against John Smoltz and the Braves to win one for the Yankees in the late 90s. Andy Pettit, one of those personified winners, a big part of Yankees World Series history. David Ortiz, again, get hammered home, another steroid guy. But Big Papi's still marketable. Big Papi's still out there, one of the best ambassadors for MLB. That I think it would be a crime to leave him out of the Hall of Fame. You talk about that World Series 2004 championship run. Big Papi had his fingerprints all over it. 2007. I think he was even with the team in the early 2010s when they won it again. So I think 3 World Series rings total for David Ortiz. Absolutely deserves a spot in my Hall of Fame. Here's where kind of fringe candidates here. Jimmy Rollins, MVP. In fact, runaway MVP when he had 30 home runs, led the league in triples, led the league in doubles, almost 300 batting average, a great shortstop, World Series champion with the Phillies. The Phillies also had to break a long playoff drought, a long World Series drought. I have Jimmy Rollins on my ballot. And then this is probably where I guess a little bit of bias comes in here. I have Tim Lincecum. I have Tim Lincecum because I think his peak was one of the greatest all-time pitching peaks of all time. It was short-lived, candle burned too bright, but 2-time Cy Young Award winner, broke a 54-year World Series drought for the San Francisco Giants, first World Series title in San Francisco Giants history. The freak, big-time Timmy Jim. Think back to being a 2-time cover athlete for 2K, being a ESPN commercial guy. He was one of the most marketable stars of the early 2010s. It's interesting because he has no social media. It's kind of hard to keep up with the guy at all. So I kind of wonder what he's doing. That's the only guy on my list. And I'm like, if there was one that I probably snub some guys, he'd probably be it. But that's the little bit of subjectivity that comes into play for me. Kyle, give me your list.
So This would prompt a more fierce debate that we have every year if we both didn't agree that the steroid people should get in. That kind of just is like, yeah, this seems kind of dumb. But at the same time, we should note, just for the spirit of disclosure. So I was 6 years old when Barry Bonds broke the home run record over Hank Aaron. I was, I believe, 3 years old when Alex Rodriguez moved to the New York Yankees. So at the same time there, like, it's interesting because you mentioned Alex Rodriguez as one of the all-time great shortstops. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, that's right. Alex Rodriguez did play shortstop at one point. My entire life, he's been a third baseman. And that's just something that's kind of weird on the backside. So there are weird things like that. Obviously, David Ortiz is an easy one. But some of these people, again, I just did not watch them play at all. So Andrew Jones and Gary Sheffield, I hear they had very good careers. I did not watch them play at all. Both of them probably deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, if not for the steroid situation. So those two, just want to throw them a bone. I never really watched them play. But right off the bat, people who we had the same for. So Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Alex Rodriguez, we had the same. I threw Sammy Sosa in there as well. I know Sammy Sosa's on the last year of the ballot, and he doesn't get talked about a lot because he's only at like 30% or something. So he's got like virtually no chance of getting it, but I'll throw Sammy Sosa on there as well. I know he's kind of like disappeared and reappeared at times over the past few years to make his case for the Hall of Fame, but yeah, we'll throw Sammy Sosa on there as well. So that's 4. We can throw Manny Ramirez in there as well. I know his numbers aren't quite as off the bat as Sammy Sosa, but Manny Ramirez is another just classic, very much steroid guy, but also very, very good player from those 2000s Red Sox teams. David Ortiz, that's another one that's the same. One that I was surprised you didn't throw in there that I would add to the list is Todd Halton from the Colorado Rockies.
Yeah, I will tell you, that was the one when I think about, could I have replaced Tim Lincecum on there? Todd Halton was my next man up. Todd Halton, obviously very impressive career, part of the only Colorado Rockies World Series run. So I don't blame you for having Todd Halton on there, a multiple-time All-Star, Gold Glove Award winner. You do factor in, people always talk about the steroid era, but also when talked about Todd Halton, people discuss the Coors Field effect on his numbers. Batting champion in the early 2000s as well, had a 379 batting average one year, which I just found insane.
Yeah, so that would leave 8. I don't think that's even like doable anymore, even in Colorado. I know Colorado always has like the batting champions, whether it's LeMahieu or Trevor Story or Nolan Arenado, but I think even getting to like 370 is near impossible now in modern baseball. So that would be 8 if you count the people who we had the same: Bonds, Clemens, Andrew Jones, David Ortiz. I said A-Rod, Manny Ramirez, Sammy Sosa. 8 would be Todd Halton. And then we have a fun little game here because I was looking up the stats for Jimmy Rollins and Ryan Howard coming into this. And I saw both of those and I thought, man, they're basically the exact same career. Both of them have an MVP. Both of them made 3 or 4 All-Star games. They didn't last as long in terms of their career spanning 20 decades to accumulate, or not 20 decades, 20 years to accumulate all of those numbers that help get some people in the Hall of Fame, like Frank Gore in the NFL. But at the same time, those players remind me of a time in baseball where just when you tell me off the top of my head, I'm like, oh, both of those guys feel like Hall of Famers. Like those are the Hall of Famers from that Phillies team that won the World Series in 2008, went back to back in the World Series in 2009. It feels like if you're telling that baseball story, both of them would be on that list. And then you look at the numbers and realize neither of them have an actual case to really get into the Hall of Fame. Neither had a WAR higher than 50 in their career. For example, Gary Sheffield had a WAR of 60 for people keeping track at home. So neither of them really had Hall of Fame worthy numbers there. Ryan Howard never got to 400 homers. Jimmy Rollins was, I think, like a career 270 hitter, even though we think of him as like this all-time leadoff guy. Neither of them are going to get in, but both of them, I kept saying they should get in. They should get in. So I just want to throw both of them a bone here. And then you can pick either one of those to go in. I think if I were to defer, I would probably go for Jimmy Rollins, but Ryan Howard's right there too. Prince Fielder would have gotten in the Hall of Fame if he hadn't had the neck injury, but He's another one of those classic cases where the numbers just aren't going to support him enough. But my final spot that I will articulate here is for a person who's not going to get into the Hall of Fame at all, but I would like to vote for them just to make sure they get the 5% threshold and they're allowed to stay on the ballot. And that is 2006 Cy Young Award winner Jake Peavy of the San Diego Padres. Will he get in the Hall of Fame? Absolutely not. He probably won't be on the ballot next year, but Jake Peavy was the man. My first childhood star as a Padres fan was Jake Peavy, 2006 Cy Young season. He played with the Padres, I think, for another 3 years after that. Never got close to being that good again in his career. But then he went and won the World Series with the Giants and the Red Sox. And yeah, Jake Peavy, love him. He is one of 2 Cy Young Award winners in the history of the San Diego Padres. I would like to throw him a bone for a wonderful career and hope that he gets the 5% to stay on the ballot.
Jake Peavy, one of those underrated Brian Sabean trade deadline acquisitions. I will give him that. Obviously helped the Giants win that World Series in 2014. I guess I should give more love to Omar Vasquel. He's on this ballot as well. 11-time Gold Glove Award winner. I always resonate Omar Vasquel with this cover I saw back in the day on Sports Illustrated with him literally having a vacuum as a glove, like the Photoshop editing there, which was true because he was one of the best shortstops at a time in Major League Baseball. People talk about Derek Jeter potentially stealing some Gold Gloves away from him back in the day. 2,877 hits, so barely missed that 3,000 hit mark. And if he hit that 3,000 hit mark, he would be a surefire Hall of Famer. You talk about guys like Billy Wagner, who was a 400 save guy, or also you have Joe Nathan, who was also 400 save guy. Closers are a little bit tricky for me. Closers are one that I battle with because I think that their peaks have to be something similar to obviously Mariano Rivera in 600 saves. I think 500 saves is going to be that new threshold for Hall of Fame closers moving forward. Mm-hmm. Torrey Hunter was also a good one. I think Jeff Kent was also on my next ring of guys down, next tier of guys down, because obviously Jeff Kent won an MVP back in the day, was part of that middle of the order that included Barry Bonds. I think that Jeff Kent is just kind of one of those guys that when I think about, again, storytelling, the history of baseball, might be a guy that you kind of forget about. Why I give you more credit to guys like Jimmy Rollins and even Ryan Howard, like you mentioned, is being part of that 2007 World Series winning Philadelphia Phillies team. I think is going to be one of those big things that when we reflect on kind of that era of baseball, those guys will be remembered more fondly. Those two became very remarkable stars. And I think it only helps for Jimmy Rollins too, that it seems like he's gotten to the local broadcast media out there in Philadelphia. So his name is going to be constantly echoed. Some other
Jimmy
guys
Rollins and Gary Sheffield, by the way, both on the national TBS broadcast as well, doing the studio show. So that'll just be a reminder for. I think Gary Sheffield's not there anymore. I think they replaced him with Curtis Granderson this year. But
Gary's going to get in for sure. 500 home runs is a lock to get into the Hall of Fame, and he didn't have any steroid allegations thrown onto him in an era of heavy steroid allegations. So I think
I always thought that was why he wasn't getting in, was because of steroids.
I'm pretty sure he was one of the few names not listed. I can't remember what year on the ballot it is for him.
It looks like just ballparking. It looks like year 5 or 6, I think. I don't know how close he was in past votes, but
he's going to get in. I think that he's definitely one of those names. I mean, 509 home runs. They still welcome in onto a lot of MLB productions. So I think he's got into MLB's good graces.
You're right. It looks like on the last ballot, he was at 41%. So he does still have a puncher's chance of getting into the Hall of Fame.
Bobby Abreu is a guy eliminated right away. Here's my thing on Manny, because I agree that Manny is a big part of baseball history and had some great numbers. When he went to LA, had that good run there. He was okay with the White Sox one year. My thing with Manny is that the fact that he kept getting busted with steroids late in his career, the fact that he kept getting suspended, because my rule on the steroid guys, okay, when they were part of the era, no one was technically testing positive for it. I kind of give those guys a little bit of pass, but after the rules were changed to where they were testing for it, and if you kept popping up on steroids test, then I have a little bit of a problem with you. That's why I guess I get a little hypocritical on Alex Rodriguez, because he did get popped for it after testing went into play. But I think Alex Rodriguez's numbers are just so gaudy that it's hard for me to completely take him off. And then, like you mentioned, his early era shortstop career, being part of the World Series champion Yankees. There's just so many things with Alex. It's hard for me to just discount his entire career. because of the late steroids test. Being part of a Seattle Mariners team that won a MLB record regular season wins. I think that those are things I associate with him.
I believe Alex Rodriguez was not on that Mariners team that won the record number of games. I believe that is a fun fact, that Ken Griffey and Alex Rodriguez left, and then they won the record number of games. I believe that is correct. Might be wrong.
Fact check here.
Also, to add to the fact check from earlier, Gary Sheffield has been connected to PEDs because he reportedly got them from the same person Barry Bonds was getting them from, and him and Barry Bonds would train during off seasons and things like that. So no test failed for Gary Sheffield, but similarly, Barry Bonds has never had a failed test when it comes to steroids. So maybe that explains why some people are drawing the line there on Gary Sheffield. I was going to say, if you're looking for a really good documentary on the steroid era and the scandal in Miami with Alex Rodriguez getting suspended, you should check out Juiced. It's by Billy Corben. It's on Netflix. It's very, very good.
That's where we just run into so many problems with these ballots here, because even a guy like Gary Sheffield, he's thrown to the wind. And then we have these guys that are just would have been long Hall of Famers without it, that are forgotten about. Because can I justify like giving Scott Rowland a vote and not giving Barry Bonds a vote? That just feels so odd to me. Justin Morneau, he's on here too as a first-time listee. He won an MVP, but I think that when we look back, was he one of the greatest hitters in Twins history? Justin Morneau had his moments, but he's not a Hall of Famer.
It was Joe Mauer and Torrey Hunter's team, even when Justin Morneau was doing well.
I think that's kind of where I'm at. Prince Fielder, man, I tell you, I have a fun like memory of Prince Fielder going to Phoenix, Arizona for Brewer spring training. I think I saw Prince Fielder hit the longest home run I have ever seen in person. He hit this thing so far. It was not in the parking lot next to the stadium. I think it was in the next parking lot over. Just that big man energy, how much force he was able to generate into it. And then when I think about all-time Hall of Fame home run derby production, Prince Fielder is in that. He's a locked-in home run derby Hall of Famer, because his performances in there, it just seems so effortless, the way he would just flick the bat and hit it out.
I can't remember now. The home run derby where Josh Hamilton hit like 40 home runs, did Justin Morneau win that, or did Michael Kadire win that? It was one of those two, but I can't remember who it was now.
I want to say it was Justin Morneau, now they make me think about it.
Because I remember that home run derby is kind of like weirdly forgotten at Yankee Stadium, other than just him. Yep, it was Justin Morneau. It was not Michael Kadire. It was Justin Morneau. Those two had very similar careers, I feel like, but it was Justin Morneau. So Justin Morneau, home run derby hero as well.
Okay, and you are correct. Yes, I misremembered here. The 2001 Seattle Mariners team actually did not include Alex Rodriguez or Ken Griffey Jr. That was, I believe, Ichiro Suzuki's rookie season, if I'm not mistaken, where easy rookie of the year candidate right there. I think he also debuted the same year as Albert Pujols. So you talk about two Hall of Famers debuting in the same class, Ichiro and Albert.
I feel like Ichiro won MVP that year. I might be wrong on that, but I feel like Ichiro won the MVP in his rookie year.
That sounds something incorrect, because I think he was a batting champion.
He won rookie of the year and MVP that year. I was right.
Which I can't imagine that's happened too many times in baseball history.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Coming towards that time where we gotta start thinking about those guys making it to the Hall of Fame too. I think Ichiro's maybe a year or two away. Albert's obviously still playing, so we'll find out when he's officially done. I think one of the biggest things too that bugs me when I think back to this here is Barry Bonds. When he retired in 2007, it was kind of one of those Terrell Owens retirements where just like no one would sign him, because he had 27 home runs in his last season. I think he kept playing, potentially hit over 800 home runs if he would have just been like an AL in the American League at one point. Hell, send him to Yankee Stadium and just see what kind of fun he had in that bandbox. That would have been something.
If he would have done what Pujols is doing right now, which is just mercenary from stadium to stadium, trying to get to 700 home runs.
Another first-year candidate here, Mark Teixeira. See, also, too, I should note, you mentioned Sammy Sosa. I guess, too, Sammy kind of falls into the same Manny Ramirez territory, where it's like we have extracurricular stuff besides just steroids on him. Like we have an incident with him corking the bat, too. Very famous, where like literally his cork fell out onto the middle of the field. So it's like, man, this guy was literally just doing everything possible to get an edge. And then I know he had the embarrassing moment during the hearings too, when they were
that was weird because he like forgot to speak English, or like pretended like he forgot to speak English in that moment, which was weird. But I think the other part with Sammy Sosa, like relative to like Alex Rodriguez, because obviously Alex Rodriguez got busted in 2013 with the longest suspension in the history of baseball for PEDs. I think Alex Rodriguez has kind of been re-embraced a little bit, and Sammy Sosa and even the Giants have done like Barry Bonds stuff recently, like at least bringing him back to the ballpark as being welcome in the organization. The Cubs have not done that at all with Sammy Sosa, even after the World Championship, even during the past couple of years where Sosa kind of reemerged in doing interviews. The Cubs have just kind of totally distanced themselves from Sammy Sosa, even still.
It's also, we have to be honest here, Sammy Sosa kind of became a weirdo here in the later years. The fact that he literally changed his skin color in the last few years, I think is something that's like, okay, Sammy, what's going on here?
Yeah, I think he has connections to like the Saudi Arabian prince too, which is kind of weird. I don't know how that worked out, but it's been a weird turn for Sammy Sosa in retirement.
See, and that's tough, I guess, where you talk about, are you a hypocrite in certain respects? Because I do give Curt Schilling like a break for his personal life versus his playing career. But Sammy Sosa, his personal life, his playing career has some question marks in it. It's just a lot of stuff to take in with Sammy. I think of him in that same Mark McGwire tier, and Mark McGwire obviously didn't make the Hall of Fame at the end of the day. Whereas I think that the other guys that I listed are so far above Sammy Sosa. It's insane that a guy with 609 home runs is going to be kind of forgotten about as time goes on. You talk about wins above replacement. His career wins above replacement just under 60. So I guess a little bit less than Gary Sheffield there.
He's got about the same as Tim Hudson, and Tim Hudson might not have a great case for the Hall of Fame.
I want to say too, one of the things that people talk about with him as well is his home run production definitely was affected as like the steroids started to dissipate from the game. So it starts to make his numbers look a little bit more fraudulent when people think about those steroid guys. What was real, was fake. With a guy like Bonds, we knew how good he was before any steroids entered his body. With a guy like Clemens, 7-time Cy Young Award winner, we knew how good Roger Clemens was. With a guy like Sammy, is he more a 400 home run guy? Which, if he's a 400 home run guy, he's as good as Andrew Jones. And I'm saying Andrew Jones is a Hall of Famer. But it's just that little bit of doubt, of like what his career really was. I guess, yes, it is hard to be a baseball writer, as there's not a lot of easy answers here, but I think with this being the last year of Bonds and Clemens, just make it happen. Just do it. Because I think if we have to
just do a giant purge. Yeah, just purge all the steroid people in 1 year. Let's get A-Rod in. Let's get Barry Bonds in. Let's get Roger Clemens in. Let's get Sammy Sosa. Let's get Gary Sheffield. Let's bring back Mark McGwire. Let's just purge all of them at once and put them all in the Hall of Fame in 1 year, so that we don't have to do this goddamn conversation every year. And so I can talk about things I actually like talking about the Jimmy Rollins and Ryan Howard teams of my childhood.
Yeah, fair enough. Like, if we could just get this conversation out of the way, because I don't want to be looking back in 20 years and we're still having this conversation.
I'm 20 now, and I didn't grow up watching these players at all. Like I said, I remember Barry Bonds breaking the home run record. I was a very young kid watching it on SportsCenter, but I do remember it happening. I was about 6 years old, barely remember it. But now this is something that's happening for the first time in my life, as I am technically the same age as LaMelo Ball, is where I'm looking at Hall of Fame cases now. And every year I'm like, oh my God, I watched these people play now. It's not like Kurt Warner, where I got like the very end of his career. It's like, no, I watched most of Peyton Manning's career. I watched most of Calvin Johnson's career. Like I've seen most of these people playing football my entire life. And now they're going in the Hall of Fame, and Ryan Howard's going in the Hall of Fame. And I remember him in Subway commercials as a kid. And it's like, yeah, this is happening now. all the people from my childhood are now old guys about to get in the Hall of Fame.
It does change your perspective. You talk about missing out on a guy like Gary Sheffield. I always think back to whenever I used to play like 2K, MLB 2K, and I used to use Gary Sheffield's batting stance on like all my creative players, just because it was one of the cooler like swings of the game. That little back and forth rocky motion he used to do. Either that or Ken Griffey, of course, one of the sweetest swings in baseball. Barry Bonds, I just kind of loved how quick his hitch was on his swing. It was so compact, yet so powerful.
I might reveal my age on this one, but my version of that was David Price pitching. David Price on the Rays was my original video game character. Paul Goldschmidt was one of my original big guys. But again, this is many years ago for sure. David Ortiz was always a beast in MLB 2K13. David Ortiz had power in MLB 2K.